February 12, 1947. The moment lasted 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, 12 people on that subway car understood that someone was about to die. The doors of the IRT southbound train opened at 135th Street station. A man in a grey suit stepped into the car, calm, unhurried. He saw blood on the floor. He saw a woman in a torn dress surrounded by 4 white men. He saw passengers pressed against the walls, frozen in terror. The man didn't draw his gun, didn't shout, just stood there, 5 feet of quiet fury in an expensive suit, and waited. An elderly woman near the door grabbed her grandson's hand. "We're leaving, now." "But Grandma," the boy whispered, "that's Bumpy Johnson." She pulled him harder toward the next car. 2 other passengers followed without a word. Because everyone in Harlem knew the rule. When Bumpy Johnson handles business, innocent people disappear. What happened in the next 7 minutes was never officially recorded. No police report, no investigation, no witnesses willing to talk. But 3 days later, Patrick "Whitey" Callahan, the most powerful Irish mobster in Hell's Kitchen, sat in Bumpy Johnson's warehouse on 132nd Street with 7 of his men. None of them walked out the same way they came in. This is that story. Danny Moran was 24 years old and stupid in the way only privileged men can be stupid, convinced the world owed him everything because of his last name. His uncle, Patrick "Whitey" Callahan, ran Hell's Kitchen with an iron fist. Policy rackets, loan sharking, union control. Danny had grown up watching men fear his uncle, watching cops pocket envelopes, watching power bend the world to one man's will. And Danny wanted that power. But Whitey wouldn't give it to him. "You're not ready," he'd said 6 months earlier. "You don't understand how this works." So Danny decided to prove himself, decided to take something his uncle hadn't been able to take. Harlem. He'd heard the whispers in Hell's Kitchen bars. Dutch Schultz was dead, murdered back in '35, and whoever ran Harlem now, some colored gangster nobody really knew, couldn't be as dangerous as Schultz had been. "Harlem's wide open," Danny told his crew over drinks at the Callahan Social Club. "No real boss, just policy operators who fold when real muscle shows up." Finn Riley, Danny's closest friend, had doubts. "Your uncle told us to stay out of Harlem, said there's some guy there, Bumpy something, who's not to be messed with." "Bumpy Johnson?" Danny laughed. "A numbers runner? You scared of a numbers runner?" What Danny didn't know, what Whitey had failed to teach him, was that Bumpy Johnson wasn't just a policy operator. He was Harlem's protector, the man who'd gone to war with Dutch Schultz and won, the man who'd forced the Italian families to negotiate, the man who made sure Harlem stayed in the hands of its people. Danny's plan was simple: make noise, create fear, show Harlem that new management had arrived. "We hit subway cars," Danny explained, "rob the passengers, rough them up, leave a message. This is Hell's Kitchen territory now. You want protection, you pay us." "And if someone fights back?" Tommy Burns asked. Danny smiled. "Then everyone sees what happens when you fight back." On February 12, 1947, at 6:45 p.m., Danny Moran and 4 of his crew, Finn Riley, Liam O'Connor, Mickey Doyle, and Tommy Burns, boarded the IRT at 149th Street. They were hunting. 3 blocks away, Bumpy Johnson sat in his office above Small's Paradise nightclub, reviewing policy numbers with Illinois Gordon, his most trusted lieutenant. The phone rang. "Boss!" It was Jerome "Shoes" Carter, a 14-year-old who shined shoes at the 145th Street station, one of a dozen kids Bumpy kept on his payroll as eyes throughout the neighborhood. 5 white guys just got on at 149th, Irish, all carrying, heading south. Bumpy's expression didn't change, but Illinois saw his jaw tighten. "You see where they got off?" "Still on the train. Should hit 145th in about 2 minutes. Bumpy looked at his watch. 6:47 p.m. May had left church at 6:15. She'd be boarding at 145th right about now. Illinois? His voice was level. Get Willie and quick. Take 2 cars. Cover both exits at 125th Street. If shooting starts, you contain it. You going alone? I'm meeting my wife, but I want insurance. He paused. Put guards on Harlem Hospital too, 4th floor surgical ward. If these Irish boys are starting something, there will be wounded, and wounded men talk. I don't want anyone trying to silence them before they can. Illinois understood immediately. 24-hour watch until you say otherwise. Bumpy grabbed his coat and checked his .45. 7 rounds plus 1 in the chamber. He didn't think he'd need it. He was wrong. The subway car at 145th Street held about 18 passengers when May Johnson boarded at 6:48 p.m. Working people, students, an elderly couple, the tired, ordinary people of Harlem at the end of another long day. May found a seat near the middle, opened her Bible, and began reading Psalms. At the front of the car, Danny Moran and his crew stood near the doors, loud, passing a flask, making sure everyone noticed them. The train pulled out of 145th, 2 minutes to 137th. As it entered the dark tunnel, Danny looked around the car, evaluated his options, and smiled. "Boys," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I think we're in the wrong neighborhood." Finn laughed. "Yeah, Danny, we should probably get off at the next stop." "But first," Danny said, walking to the center of the car, "let's make sure these good people understand the new situation." He clicked open a switchblade. "New management in Harlem, folks. Your old boss, Dutch Schultz, dead 12 years. Nobody took his place, just small-timers running numbers. That changes tonight." He approached an elderly man, Thomas Green, 68, a retired janitor. "That's a nice watch, Pops." Thomas instinctively covered his wrist. "Please, it was my father's." Danny didn't wait. He grabbed Thomas's arm and twisted hard. The crack of bone echoed through the car. Thomas screamed. Finn stripped the watch from his wrist, while the old man clutched his broken arm, tears streaming down his face. "Lesson 1, Danny announced. "When we ask, you give. No discussions, no negotiations." The other passengers sat frozen. This was 1947 New York. Colored folks knew the rules. Don't fight white men with weapons, not unless you want to die. The train pulled into 137th Street. The doors opened. Half the passengers fled. When the doors closed again, 12 remained, all of them colored, all of them terrified, including May Johnson and Samuel Price. Sam Price was 22 years old, construction worker, World War II veteran. He'd fought in France, seen the camps, come home believing America would be different after the war, that men who'd fought fascism overseas would fight for justice at home. He'd been wrong about that, but he still believed in standing up. Sam had noticed May when she boarded. He recognized her from Abyssinian Baptist Church, Mrs. Johnson, Bumpy Johnson's wife. Sam had never met Bumpy, but every man in Harlem knew the name, knew what it meant. And watching these Irish thugs terrorize the car, watching them break an old man's wrist, Sam felt something he hadn't felt since France, the certainty that some moments define you, that sometimes you can't just watch. Danny moved through the car with growing confidence, taking a young woman's purse, tearing her coat when she resisted, taking a man's wallet, a teenager's class ring. With each theft he grew louder, more theatrical. "You see how easy this is?" he said to his crew. "This is what I keep telling Whitey. Harlem is ours for the taking. These people won't fight back. They're trained not to." That's when he noticed May sitting quietly, Bible in her lap, well-dressed, composed, as if none of this was happening around her. "Well, look at this," Danny said, walking toward her. "A church lady. What's a nice woman like you doing in a place like this?" May didn't look up, kept reading. Danny leaned closer. I asked you a question. May finally looked up. Her voice was perfectly calm. I'm going home to my husband. Your husband? Danny laughed. And who's that? Does he have money? Does he have power? He has both, and he's meeting me at 125th Street. She held Danny's gaze. If you're still here when he arrives, you won't leave this train alive. For 1 second, Danny looked uncertain. Then he laughed harder. Boys, did you hear that? Her husband's coming to save her. He looked back at May. What's his name, lady? Who is this Superman husband? May didn't answer. Danny grabbed her arm and jerked her to her feet. Her Bible fell to the floor. Her purse spilled, lipstick, a compact mirror, keys, and a small .38 revolver, which skidded 3 feet across the subway floor. May saw it the same moment Danny's crew started laughing. Danny was momentarily distracted, playing to his audience. Her hand shot out and grabbed the gun. She spun, pointed it at Danny's chest, pulled back the hammer. Let me go! The entire car went silent. Danny's smile faded. He looked at the gun, then at May. Then he laughed. You're not going to... May pulled the trigger. Click. The hammer fell on an empty chamber. May's eyes went wide. The gun wasn't loaded. She had forgotten. Bumpy had trained her, made her practice until it was muscle memory. You load it when you leave the house. Every time, without exception. But that morning she'd been running late. Church started at 9, and she'd rushed out the door. Danny's face twisted into a cruel smile. He ripped the gun from her hand and threw it across the car. Stupid woman thought she'd shoot me with an empty gun. He grabbed her hair, yanked her head back hard. That's when Samuel Price stood up. Let her go. The car went silent again. Danny turned slowly. What did you say? Sam's voice was shaking but steady. I said let her go. She's not part of this. She's just trying to get home. Danny studied him for a long moment, then smiled. You a hero? That what you are? I'm just asking you to leave her alone, and if you don't, then you deal with me. Danny laughed, released May, walked toward Sam. You ever been cut before, hero? France. Took shrapnel. So yeah, I've been cut. That was war. This, Danny raised the knife. This is just because you couldn't mind your business. Sam raised his fists. I minded my business for 2 years in Europe, fought Nazis who thought they could terrorize anyone they wanted, came home and found out America's got its own version. So no, I won't mind my business anymore. The train was pulling into 135th Street. The doors would open in 15 seconds. Danny lunged, no warning, no fair fight, and drove the knife into Sam's stomach, twisted the blade. Sam looked down at the spreading red stain on his shirt, then looked up at Danny with pure shock. I was just trying to help, Sam whispered. He collapsed, hit the floor hard. Blood began pooling beneath him. May screamed. The doors opened at 135th Street. 3 passengers fled. That left 9, including Bumpy Johnson, who had been standing on the platform, who had seen everything through the window as the train pulled in, and who now stepped into the car as the doors closed behind him. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Sam Price was dying on the floor, blood pooling around him, breathing shallow and labored. May was on her knees beside him, pressing both hands against the wound, trying to stop what couldn't be stopped. Her hands were already soaked red. Danny and his 4 men stood over them, knives and guns drawn. At the front of the car, Bumpy Johnson stood perfectly still, taking it all in, calculating. Danny turned and looked at him. Just another colored man in a suit. Car's full, Pops. Find another seat, or get off at 125th. Bumpy didn't respond. He walked slowly forward. His eyes never left Danny's face. One of the 9 remaining passengers, Mrs. Beatrice Washington, 74, a church mother who'd lived in Harlem her whole life, recognized him. She grabbed the 2 people on either side of her. Come with me, right now. They fled to the next car without a word. 6 passengers left. Danny noticed how those 3 people had looked at the man in the grey suit before running. "You somebody I should know?" he asked. Bumpy knelt beside Sam and pressed 2 fingers to his neck. The pulse was there, weak, thready, already fading. The wound had gone deep. The blood was dark and thick. Liver, maybe intestines. Internal bleeding that no amount of pressure could stop. Even if an ambulance was waiting on the platform right now, Sam wouldn't make it. Bumpy had seen enough knife wounds in his life to know this was fatal. He leaned close to Sam's ear. "Sam, can you hear me?" Sam's eyes fluttered open, barely focused, barely there. "Your mother, Dorothy Price, 447 West 133rd Street. I know her. I'll take care of her. I promise she'll never work another day. You hear me?" Sam's lips moved. Bumpy leaned closer. "Tell her I tried," Sam whispered. "I will. You're a hero, Sam. Harlem won't forget you." Sam's eyes closed. His breathing grew even more shallow. Bumpy stood and looked at May. She saw it in his face before he said a word. "There's nothing we can do." "May," his voice was quiet. "Come here." May looked up and saw her husband. Relief and grief flooded her face at the same moment. She started to stand, but Danny grabbed her hair. "She stays. We're not done." Bumpy's expression didn't change. "Take your hand off my wife." Danny's eyes widened slightly. Then he laughed. "You're the Superman husband, the one who's supposed to save her." "Last chance," Bumpy said quietly. "Take your hand off her. Get off at 125th. Leave New York tonight. If you do that, you live." Danny looked at his 4 men, looked at this one middle-aged man in a suit, smiled. "You know who I am? Patrick Callahan's nephew, Hell's Kitchen. We run this city now, and starting tonight we run Harlem." "No," Bumpy said. "You die in Harlem tonight, unless you're smart." Finn pulled his gun and leveled it at Bumpy. "He's bluffing. He's alone." Bumpy reached into his coat, drew his .45, racked the slide. 6 minutes to 125th, he said. "Make your choice." Danny tightened his grip on May's hair. "You shoot, I kill her." "No," Bumpy said. "You kill her, I kill all 4 of you before this train stops. Then I kill your uncle. Then I burn Hell's Kitchen to the ground." A pause. "Or you let her go, and maybe you survive." There was something in his voice that wasn't anger, wasn't threat, just certainty, the way you'd say the sun rises or water is wet. The words of a man who had already seen the outcome and was simply informing everyone else. Danny felt it, felt doubt crawling in underneath his pride. Then his pride won. He was Patrick Callahan's nephew. He didn't back down from anybody. "Finn," Danny said. "On 3. Bumpy shot Finn in the elbow. The joint exploded. Finn screamed and dropped, grabbing his shattered arm. 5 minutes, Bumpy said. Danny released May and stepped back, still trying to salvage something. "You're making a mistake. My uncle—" "Your uncle failed you," Bumpy said. "Failed to teach you the most important lesson. Know your enemy. Know the territory. Know when you're beat." He looked at each man in turn. "You came to my neighborhood, terrorized my people, stabbed a good man who was trying to help, put your hands on my wife." He let the silence hold for a moment. "Now you've paid tuition." Tommy Burns started crying. "We didn't know. Danny said it would be easy." Bumpy shot Tommy in the right knee. Tommy collapsed, howling. 4 minutes. He turned to Liam. "You touched my wife." Liam's eyes went wide. I didn't mean—" Crack, left knee. Liam went down. 3 minutes. He turned to Mickey, who had already dropped to his knees, hands raised. "Please, I'll go to the police. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything." "No, you won't," Bumpy said calmly. "Because if you talk to the police, I visit your family, your mother, your sisters, everyone you love. They learn what happens when you cross Bumpy Johnson." He waited. "Understand?" Mickey nodded frantically. The train began slowing. 2 minutes to 125th Street. Bumpy looked at Danny. "You're going to deliver a message to your uncle. Tell him his nephew came to Harlem to take my territory. Tell him what happened. Tell him if he wants to discuss it, he knows where to find me. But tell him if he sends anyone else into my neighborhood." Bumpy stepped close enough that Danny could feel his breath. "They end up like you." "Like me?" Danny said. "I'm still standing. For now." The train pulled into 125th Street. Bumpy backed toward the doors, guns still trained on the four men. May followed, holding her torn dress together. Behind them, on the floor, Samuel Price took his last breath. The 6 remaining passengers would later tell police that the young man had stopped breathing at exactly 7:08 p.m. The doors closed. The train continued south, carrying Samuel Price's body, 4 wounded men, and 6 witnesses who would never forget. Detective Robert Walsh arrived at the 125th Street crime scene at 7:45 p.m. What he found made him understand immediately that this was going to be complicated. 1 dead body, Samuel Price, 22, construction worker, World War II veteran, stabbed once in the abdomen. 4 wounded suspects, all white, all Irish, all refusing treatment until they'd spoken to lawyers. And 6 colored witnesses who all told the exact same story. The white men started it. Sam Price tried to help. He got killed. Bumpy Johnson defended his wife. Walsh was 47 years old with 22 years on the force. He knew how Harlem worked. He knew who Bumpy Johnson was. He also knew this case was politically radioactive. His captain, James Riley, pulled him aside at the hospital. "What are we looking at?" 5 Irish thugs terrorized a subway car, robbed passengers, killed a war veteran who tried to stop them. Bumpy Johnson shot 2 of them, non-fatally, to defend his wife. The other 2 surrendered. Bumpy Johnson is a criminal. Bumpy Johnson defended his wife in front of 6 witnesses who will all testify to that. Riley was quiet for a moment. "The press is going to love this. Colored gangster shoots white men on subway. Doesn't matter what it looks like. It was self-defense." Walsh kept his voice flat. "We charge the Irish crew with assault and murder. We call Johnson's actions justifiable. Case closed." "And Patrick Callahan? What's he going to do when he hears his nephew got shot by—" "That's not police business. That's criminal business. Let them sort it out." But Walsh knew it wouldn't be that simple. That same night, at 11:30 p.m., his home phone rang. "Detective Walsh." The voice was calm, cultured. "This is Bumpy Johnson. We should talk." They met at midnight in Riverside Park. Walsh brought 2 plainclothes detectives stationed 50 yards back. Bumpy came alone. "Mr. Johnson, calling a police detective at home is bold." "I'm a bold man, but I'm also a practical one." Bumpy looked out at the dark water. "You're investigating what happened tonight. I want to make sure you understand the full picture." "I understand 4 men are in the hospital. 1 man is dead." "Samuel Price, good kid, war veteran, worked construction, tried to help my wife and died for it." He paused. "I've already been in contact with his mother. Set up a fund. She'll never work another day in her life." "That's generous. It doesn't change what happened." "No, it doesn't. But what happened is this. 4 men committed robbery and murder in front of 6 witnesses, all of whom will testify, which means you have no case against me, but you have a very clear case against Danny Moran and his crew." Walsh studied him. "What do you want, Mr. Johnson?" "I want you to do your job. Charge them with robbery, assault, and murder. Let justice work." "And Callahan? He's not going to let this go." "Callahan is going to learn a lesson tonight about respect, about territory, about what happens when you don't educate your people properly. But that's not your concern." Bumpy met his eyes. "Your concern is that Samuel Price gets justice, and if the law won't deliver it," his voice dropped, "the street will. Your choice, detective, a clean case you can close, or a war in Harlem that makes your life hell for the next 6 months." Walsh understood the calculation. An out, a way to close this cleanly. The 4 suspects, Walsh said slowly, after they're released from the hospital, what happens to them? That depends on their uncle. If Callahan's smart, he pulls them out of New York. A pause. If he's not, they learn more lessons. Walsh made his decision. The case against you is self-defense, clear cut. But Johnson, if bodies start showing up, they won't. I'm a businessman, detective. Violence is bad for business. I just want my neighborhood left alone. Bumpy walked away and disappeared into the darkness of Riverside Park. Walsh watched him go, then called to his backup. We're done here. What'd he say? He said the right things. Now we see if he meant them. What Walsh didn't know was what came next. Walsh closed his file within 48 hours. But Danny Moran's story didn't end there. 3 days after the incident, after posting $50,000 bail arranged by his uncle, Danny was on a train to Boston with a new name and new instructions. The charges against him? Robbery, assault, manslaughter. They were quietly dropped 6 months later. Insufficient evidence. The 6 witnesses had become unreliable. 2 had moved out of state. 3 refused to testify. 1 couldn't remember anything clearly. Money and influence made the legal case disappear. Danny Moran never returned to New York, never stood trial, never faced a courtroom. He lived the rest of his life in Boston, working in his uncle's operations there, always glancing over his shoulder, because Bumpy Johnson had told him, "If I ever see you in Harlem again, you won't leave alive." And Danny believed him. Finn Riley and Tommy Burns were recovering at Harlem Hospital, both scheduled for surgery on their shattered joints. Thanks to Bumpy's foresight, 2 nights earlier, Illinois Gordon and 3 armed men had been stationed on the 4th floor since Wednesday, rotating shifts, 24-hour watch. They weren't just guarding one room, they were watching the entire floor, every entrance, every stairwell, every elevator. Bumpy's orders had been clear. Whitey's going to try something. When he does, catch them in the act. Patrick Whitey Callahan was 52 years old and smart enough to know when he'd miscalculated. His first instinct was retaliation. Send 20 men, burn Bumpy's businesses, make clear that Hell's Kitchen didn't take disrespect. But Whitey was a businessman first, and the math didn't work. Bumpy Johnson controlled Harlem, every street, every business, every politician. If this became a war, Whitey might win battles, but would lose the campaign. The cost would be ruinous, unless he could eliminate the problem quietly. On February 14th at 3 a.m., Whitey sent 2 men, not his own, hired guns from Boston, to Harlem Hospital. Their job? Extract Finn and Tommy before they could talk to prosecutors. The plan was clean. Fake orderly uniforms, stolen IDs, a stolen ambulance waiting outside. At 2:47 a.m., Illinois was in the 4th floor break room, nursing bad coffee, when Marcus Cole leaned in and whispered, "2 orderlies just got off the elevator, wrong uniforms, wrong badges, heading toward the surgical ward." Illinois stood and picked up his gun. "How many?" "2, both armed. I can see it under the scrubs." "Let them get to the room. I want them caught trying." Illinois moved silently down the corridor and positioned himself in a storage closet with a view of the hallway. Marcus and 2 others appeared from the stairwell and took positions. The fake orderlies approached room 412, produced a key, opened the door, and stepped inside. Illinois waited 5 seconds, then stepped out. When he opened the door, both men were standing over Finn's bed. One had a syringe in his hand, lethal dose of morphine. "Drop it," Illinois said quietly, "or I drop you." Both men froze, looked at 3 guns pointed at them. One started to reach for his weapon. "Don't," Illinois said. They surrendered. 30 minutes later, they were zip-tied in the back of a van, heading to Bumpy's warehouse on 132nd Street. At 4:15 a.m., Bumpy sat across from them in a cold concrete room. "Who sent you?" "We don't know." Bumpy nodded. Willie Lee broke the first man's finger. After 5 fingers between them, they talked. Whitey Callahan had paid $5,000 to extract his men, or silence them, before they could testify. Bumpy sat back. So Whitey knows his nephew started a war he can't win, and instead of pulling back, he's trying to eliminate evidence. Smart, but not smart enough. He looked at Illinois. Let them go. They're messengers now. He turned back to the 2 hired guns. "You're going to call Whitey Callahan. You're going to tell him the extraction failed. And you're going to tell him that if he tries again, I don't just stop him, I come for him. His businesses, his family, everything." He waited. "Understood?" They nodded. "Good. Now get out of my neighborhood." At 6:30 a.m. on February 14th, Whitey Callahan received a phone call in his apartment above the social club on 10th Avenue. "Mr. Callahan, Bumpy Johnson, we need to finish our conversation." Whitey had been expecting this. "What do you want?" "Your nephew came to my territory to prove something to you, to show he was ready for power. Instead, he showed he was reckless, stupid, and dangerous. And that's on you. You're his boss, his teacher. You never taught him respect, never taught him limits. That failure cost a good man his life, cost your nephew his freedom. Now it's going to cost you. What are you demanding?" "The 6 men who worked with Danny, the ones who knew what he was planning and didn't stop him. Bring them to me." "That's my crew." "Your crew crossed my line. You pay the price for bad leadership." Whitey was silent for a long moment. If he refused, Bumpy would go to every newspaper in New York. The political heat would be unbearable. But if he gave up 6 men... "I bring them to you. What happens to them?" "They learn. Then they leave New York permanently. Same as Danny, who I assume you're already moving." "He goes to Boston tomorrow." "Smart. Then bring me his crew. We settle this. You keep your organization, I keep my neighborhood. Everyone walks away." "When?" "Tonight. Midnight. Your social club. Just you, me, and enough men to keep things orderly. You fight, your club burns. You cooperate, this ends tonight." After Bumpy hung up, Whitey sat alone in his office for 20 minutes. Just sat there. His consigliere, Eddie Murphy, knocked and entered. "Boss, what did Johnson say?" "He wants the 6. Eddie, Mick, Sean, Paulie, Rory, Brendan, tonight." Eddie's face went pale. "You're not seriously..." "I'm considering it. They're our crew. They knew what Danny was planning. They celebrated when he came back bragging. That makes them complicit." "So you're just going to hand them over to..." Whitey looked at Eddie with steady eyes. "Do you know the difference between a smart boss and a dead boss?" Eddie said nothing. "A smart boss knows when he's been beat. A dead boss keeps fighting until somebody puts him in the ground." Whitey stood and walked to the window, looked out at Hell's Kitchen. "I built this organization over 20 years, started with nothing, fought the Italians, fought the cops, fought everybody, built something that matters." He turned back. "Danny was my nephew. I love that kid. But he was reckless, and I didn't teach him right. That's on me, not on Bumpy Johnson. So we survive. We take the loss. We learn the lesson. And we make damn sure nobody in this organization ever forgets it." "What about the 6? What happens to them?" "They get hurt. They leave New York, but they live." Whitey sat back down. "That's better than the alternative, which is war with Bumpy Johnson, which we lose, and then the 6 die anyway, plus a dozen more, plus maybe me." He looked at his desk. "Call them in. Tell them to be here at 11:30. February 14th, 11:50 p.m., the Callahan Social Club, 10th Avenue. Inside, Whitey Callahan, 6 men from Danny's extended crew, 2 bodyguards. Armed, tense, waiting. "Boss," Eddie said quietly, "we can take him. There's 8 of us. We outnumber whatever he brings." "Shut up," Whitey said. "You don't understand what's happening. Johnson's not coming to fight. He's coming to teach. We already lost." At 11:58 p.m., the front door opened. Bumpy Johnson walked in. Behind him, Illinois Gordon and 3 men. 5 total. Eddie allowed himself a small smirk. "That's all you brought?" Then the back door burst open. Willie Lee and 5 men poured through. Windows shattered. Quick Jackson and 4 more came in from both sides. Within 30 seconds, 16 armed men filled the room. Whitey's bodyguards reached for weapons, froze. "Nobody moves," Bumpy said calmly. "Nobody dies. We're just having a conversation." He looked at the 6 crew members. "You worked with Danny. You knew what he was planning. You celebrated when he came back talking about how easy it was." He let that sit. "That makes you part of the culture that produced him. The culture that says Harlem is easy, that says colored people don't matter, that says actions don't have consequences." His voice hardened. "Tonight you learn different." Illinois stepped forward. He moved methodically down the line, both knees, all 7 men. Whitey went first. When it was done, the warehouse echoed with screaming and the smell of gunpowder. Bumpy knelt in front of Whitey, reached into his coat, and placed a folded note in Whitey's shirt pocket. "You're responsible for everyone under you. You failed to teach them respect. This is the price." He stood. "Call ambulances. Keep them all alive." Then he walked out. The note read, 3 hours later in the hospital, when Whitey's hands had stopped shaking enough to unfold it. "A boss teaches 2 things, respect and limits. You taught neither. Now both are broken. Leave New York. Don't come back. If I see you or your men in my neighborhood again, next time it's not your knees. BJ." Detective Walsh sat across from Whitey in his hospital room. "Who did this?" Whitey stared at the ceiling. "Warehouse accident." "Mr. Callahan, 7 men, same injuries, same night." "Machinery malfunction. I can protect you if you testify." "No," Whitey said flatly. "You can't protect anyone from Bumpy Johnson. Go after him, he comes back harder. So it was an accident. Now leave." Walsh closed his notebook. "You're protecting the man who crippled you." "I'm protecting my family." A pause. "I'm moving to New Orleans. My brother's there. I'm never coming back to New York." Within a week, all 7 men had left the city, scattered to different states. None ever returned. And in Hell's Kitchen, other crews filled the vacuum left behind, but not one of them ever tried to move into Harlem. The message was understood, block by block, bar by bar. Bumpy Johnson's territory was untouchable. Within 24 hours of Sam Price's death, the story had spread through Harlem like a fire. Barbershops, churches, pool halls, street corners, everywhere the same conversation. "Did you hear? Bumpy Johnson shot 2 white men on the subway. They were attacking his wife. And Sam Price, Dorothy's boy, he tried to stop them first. They killed him, and Bumpy made sure they paid." At Small's Paradise on Thursday night, the bartender, a man named Claude who'd worked there 15 years, refused to serve a white customer. "Not tonight," he said firmly. The customer looked offended. "Why not? You hear what happened on that train Tuesday? One of ours died protecting a woman. So no, not tonight." The customer left, never came back. At the 135th Street Market on Friday morning, vendors posted a sign, "In memory of Samuel Price, hero of Harlem," and underneath in smaller letters, "Protected by Bumpy Johnson." On Sunday, Reverend Adam Clayton Powell, Jr. addressed his congregation at Abyssinian Baptist Church. "Brothers and sisters, the world tells us to accept injustice, to bow our heads, to let men do whatever they want. But Samuel Price didn't bow. He stood up. And Bumpy Johnson, whether you agree with his methods or not, made sure Sam's death meant something. The congregation murmured. "I'm not here to glorify violence," Powell continued, "but I am here to tell you this. When the law won't protect us, when the police call a murder an unfortunate incident and move on, when the system fails us completely, we protect ourselves. And sometimes that protection comes from unexpected places." This wasn't just a story anymore, it was a declaration. Harlem protects its own. Over 2,000 people attended Samuel Price's funeral at Abyssinian Baptist Church on February 26th. Most had never met him. They came because his death meant something. Bumpy paid for everything, the service, the flowers, the burial. He set up a fund, $500 a month for Sam's mother, Dorothy, for the rest of her life. A college scholarship for Sam's younger sister, Grace. Bumpy stood in the back of the church during the service, didn't sit with the family, just paid his respects. But everyone noticed him there, and everyone understood this wasn't only a funeral. It was Bumpy Johnson saying, "One of ours died. I made it right." After the service, as Bumpy stood alone near Sam's grave, a black Lincoln pulled up. A man stepped out, mid-50s, impeccable suit, the kind of presence that communicates power without a single word. "Mr. Johnson, Anthony Bender. I represent Mr. Costello's interests in Manhattan." Bumpy shook his hand. "Mr. Bender. Mr. Costello asked me to convey his respects and to clarify something. The Harlem situation is settled. Our organization has no interest in your territory. We recognize your sovereignty." Bumpy nodded slowly. "Tell Mr. Costello I appreciate his wisdom. He also wanted me to mention the Irish situation has been addressed. Callahan's people have been informed of the new boundaries." The car drove away. Illinois approached. "That was Costello's consigliere," Illinois said. "I know." Bumpy watched the Lincoln disappear. "We just redrew the map of New York, and they're acknowledging it." He straightened his jacket. "Harlem's ours, officially." That afternoon, Bumpy visited Dorothy Price at her apartment on West 133rd Street. She was surrounded by neighbors who'd come to offer condolences. When Bumpy entered, the room went quiet. "Mrs. Price," he said quietly, "your son saved my wife. I can never repay that, but you'll never worry about money again." Dorothy stood and took his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Samuel admired you, Mr. Johnson, said you were Harlem's protector." She looked at him steadily. "Now I understand why." 2 weeks after the incident, May Johnson stood on the platform at 145th Street, preparing to board the IRT. She'd had nightmares every night since it happened. Sam's blood, Danny's hands in her hair, the sound of the knife. She'd wake up 3-4 times a night and lie there in the dark. Bumpy would hold her. "It's okay, you're safe." But she wasn't safe, not in her mind. On the 5th night, she finally broke. "He died because of me," she sobbed. "Sam died because I spoke up. If I'd just stayed quiet." "Then Danny would have hurt that old man worse," Bumpy said firmly. "Would have hurt more people. You didn't cause this, May. Danny caused this. And Sam made his own choice. He stood up. That's not your burden to carry." She pulled back and looked at her husband. "You kill people, Bumpy. You hurt people. You walked onto that train and shot 2 men like it was nothing." He was quiet for a long moment. "It wasn't nothing. Every man I've ever hurt, I remember. Every choice I've made, I live with. But I don't regret protecting you. I don't regret making sure those men never hurt anyone else again." "How do you live with it? The violence?" "By knowing the alternative. If I don't protect Harlem, who will? The police? They called Sam's death an unfortunate incident and went home. They don't care about us, so someone has to." He took her hand. "The nightmares will fade. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. And when they do, you'll know you survived something that would have broken most people." Now she stood on the platform, hands trembling slightly, heart beating too fast. Bumpy had offered to drive her everywhere. She'd refused. "If I let them make me afraid," she told him. They win. Every woman in Harlem will learn to be afraid. I won't teach that lesson. At 6:32 p.m. on February 26th, May walked down to the platform. When she boarded, people recognized her. Word had spread about what she'd done, how she'd stood up, how she'd faced them. An elderly woman offered her seat immediately. "Mrs. Johnson, please." A young construction worker approached, cap in hand. "Ma'am, what you did on that train? My sister heard about it. She works downtown. White folks treat her terrible every day, but your story gave her something." He paused, searching for the word. "Hope. Thank you." May's eyes filled with tears, understanding for the first time that Sam's death had become something larger than itself, something that would outlast all of them. The train rolled south. At 135th Street, Bumpy boarded, same as always, same calm presence, and sat beside her. He took her hand without saying anything. They rode to 125th together, walked home through Harlem's streets, streets that were safer now, streets where people understood something that didn't need to be spoken aloud. We protect our own. Samuel Price, 1925 to 1947. He died protecting a stranger. He died a hero. Harlem remembers.